to the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence. I'm your host, Sarah Payne, and I'm bringing you fascinating conversations with some of the industry's top marketing minds. Today's episode is part 2 of our series on building a strategic marketing organization from the ground up. In part 1, we discussed how to recognize if your team is operating reactively rather than strategically. Today, we're taking it a step further, moving into actionable steps to build a scalable and measurable marketing team that can truly drive growth. Joining me again today is Yvonne Leonard, an expert at building and leading strategic marketing organizations. With a track record of driving digital transformation, leading product launches, and building thought leadership programs, she's known for creating high-performing teams that balance continuous improvement with collaboration and fun. Welcome back, Yvonne.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Yeah, we've got some work to do today, don't we, to give people some actionable advice. And I know you've got a lot of experience and wisdom to share on this.
We sure do. Yeah. Let's dig in. I'm excited
Let's
to
dig in. So let's talk about when you've been called in to restructure a team. What are some of the most common core issues that you start with?
So one of the things I always look for is, right, are we operating with purpose? And what do I mean by that? Do we know what we're trying to do? And I think last time we talked a little bit about bright, shiny object, but this doesn't always even land with bright, shiny objects. There's, often we should do a seminar. We need to go to this trade show. We need a one-pager. We should, host XYZ. And the first question we need to ask is, what are we trying to accomplish, right?
Yes.
What are we trying to accomplish? And then I go back to my ad agency roots, right? To say, if we're going to try to accomplish awareness, how do we do that? How do we build awareness? If it's perception, how are we going to build perception? And do we think we have the awareness already? Or do we not, right? So I think business to business is an interesting area because our world is so media driven now from a social standpoint and grassroots efforts. But right, like I don't have a superstar who is, well, occasionally we get lucky, but you typically don't send, a medical device to a superstar and, they carry it on their back to, the next award season and it becomes the thing, right? So we don't have some of that. We don't have the influencers, but the world is working that way, right? So how do we think about what can we accomplish? What do we have to accomplish? And what is the smartest way for us to do that? And the most effective way for us to do that? And can we measure it? So understanding what we're trying to do really is at the bare bones of it. And then getting stakeholder understanding or agreement with, yes, this is what we're going to do. So let's stop talking about what it is and let's start talking about what we need to get done. And then let the marketing team come back with a recommendation based on what you need to get done, how we will approach that. And that's cornerstone stuff, but it's stuff that in the speed of the world and the demands of things, it's something that's often overlooked. It's a discipline that you actually have to put a pin in it and say, we're going to do this. We have to have the discussion. So when tactics are started without understanding ultimately what the objective is and how we're going to measure it, what does success look like? That is a problem. So I would say one of the fastest and easiest things to start doing with a team is to say, tell me about this project that you have. What's the objective? Okay, how do we know it's going to be successful? And if success is based on conjecture and it's based on conjecture of a group of individuals, you're never going to know if it was successful. Like that's going to be a fundamental problem. So you may have to determine, right, what success looks like for your team, and then right? Socialize what that means to those other stakeholders to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to know if it was successful. So I think those are things that you can start doing or looking at immediately. Like, do you have an objective? Can you measure it? And I think that that's fundamental. And then when you have that objective, how are we going to approach that? Because not every tactic works for every objective. Or sometimes you could say, yeah, there's a stretch there, but it may be not the most efficient way potentially for somebody to do something. So, for example, building awareness. When people say they're going to go to a trade show to build awareness, I would say, I think a trade show is probably more appropriate to build thought leadership, build perception, you know, create demand for a new product potentially. Building awareness, it's probably not the best. It's just not the most efficient. And for the cost of doing awareness that way
Right.
is not efficient compared to other mediums, a la digital marketing. And so understanding that, and that's not to say you shouldn't do them, but like, let's call a spade, and let's make sure we understand that, yes, we can build a little awareness, potentially limited at a trade show. We can do X, Y, and Z at the trade show, but you know what? The trade show is probably going to be more successful if you've already done some awareness building with that audience and then have a reason for them to seek further, right? Either thought leadership or this product, but that's a challenge. And so, understanding that, if you're going to develop leads, what does that mean? If somebody comes to a webinar, is that a qualified lead? I would argue probably not. I go to the boat show in Minnesota with my husband, yellow boat, but sometimes in February, there's nothing else to do. So I'm not in the market for a new boat, but you know what? It's a cheap Friday night date.
Right.
So I'm not a lead for that boat dealer, and I'm not going to purchase a boat on a whim. So it's the same kind of thing. If lead generation is the desire, I'm not going to argue that you're not going to potentially put people to the top of a marketing funnel by having them go to a webinar, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're qualified. And so really starting to have some of these discussions, and with your sales organization or your inside sales organization and your marketing organization, and understanding what you need to do and where those handoffs are. Do you have processes in place? Do you not have processes in place? Do you have the infrastructure to do what you're trying to do? Those are things that, really need to be thought through. And so, and those are discussions you have to have. And the question ultimately has to be like, why? And if you have lead gen as part of your marketing program, like, do you know what a qualified lead looks like in your organization? And then what does that look like right on the back end? How many of your qualified leads are actually converting? And does that make sense? Or should you be working with the sales organization and really kind of trying to understand, is there a better place for qualification to happen? Maybe it's earlier. Maybe we need to do some more of that. Like, is that an open conversation that is being had within the organization so that you know how to drive things forward? So it's those kinds of things, like understanding the reason and what you're trying to accomplish with each thing. Each marketing tactic should have a purpose. And if you don't know what that purpose is, I would question the tactic.
Yeah.
And if you have goals that aren't being reached, I would look at the tactics that are driving those goals and the activities that are driving to those goals and say, okay, are these the right tactics, or what can we do to improve these things? Or do we need to do something else? Like, have we tried this and it, like, you've given it the college shot and it's not working? Okay.
Right.
How do we re-engineer? So I think it's you need to have that flexibility to kind of really take a hard look at stuff and say, okay, is this working? And is it working based on an agreed upon understanding of this is what it was supposed to do?
Yeah.
Are we doing it because we feel good about it ourselves and we love to do it? Or are we actually doing it because it's moving the needle?
Yeah.
Those are
100%.
discussions. Yeah.
Yeah. So to recap some of the core areas to solve, talked about roles and expectations within the marketing organization. You talked about clear objectives and outputs, which is part of the infrastructure and the process discussion. And there's, I'm sure, a lot that sort of falls under this process and infrastructure bucket. And one of those things is understanding the customer as well. So what are some of the ways, Yvonne, that you've found success in uncovering what customers are really looking for, what matters to them, and being able to make some strategic marketing decisions that's centered around that?
So I think you can do things both qualitatively and quantitatively. So from a qualitative standpoint, I think talk to your sales organization to get their perspective. Talk to customers directly. And I would say any marketer should be talking to customers on a regular basis.
Mm.
And you should start the conversation with, I'm in marketing, so I'm not going to try to sell you anything.
Yeah.
What I need to understand is, what do you think about XYZ? And maybe it's your category, maybe it's not just your company, right? Sometimes it's important to ask a lot of questions, and not always self-centered questions, but market questions. What do you think the biggest unsolved need in the market is? What do you think your biggest challenge is going to be in the next 5 years? Your product or service may not address that, but knowing that and knowing that that is mind share that is going to be used up by your customer is an important thing to know, right? So you can do those kinds of things. You can do a little bit of a retrospective, right? If you do have content on your website and you have good measurement on your website, where are people clicking? Where are they lingering? Are you looking at page views? Are you looking at specific page views? Are you looking at blogs? Are there blogs that people, are all of your blogs approximately the same length? And if they are, within 1,000 words, like why, are people staying on certain blogs longer? What are those? Are there any patterns there? Are there patterns between that and Google, right? So looking at some of those things, right, which Google Analytics can help you with, and really looking at your website and some of that. And then I think I'm a big one for, if you have a budget, doing both qualitative and quantitative research with customers to find out what they want definitively, right? And if you can afford to use a third party, I think it adds credibility. If you can do it blinded, sometimes you get some very brutal truths that your organization probably needs to hear.
Agreed.
And then I think building a open, honest relationship with some of your customers that, right, are like a good girlfriend would be to me when they say like, that's not for you.
It's not working for you, Yvonne.
Yeah, no. And you need that from customers, but most customers are not going to tell you that. Most customers are going to be my husband, right? Oh, that looks lovely. They're not going to tell me the truth that like those jeans have got to go, right? So it's the same kind of thing, right? And looking at it, and as a marketer, our job is to be stewards to our customer within our organization, which means with product development, providing the insight to continue to develop products that our customers want. If it's services, if it's content that we're working on, we need to think about our customers and provide them with what they're looking for, right? I'm a big analogy person, but like, I don't want you, my husband, to give me a vacuum cleaner for Christmas. Like, we might need a new vacuum cleaner, or, I might like to even vacuum, but like, don't give me one for Christmas. Like, we need to think about our customers. We are giving them gifts. Content is a gift. New products and services are a gift. We need to think about what they want, right? Everybody knows and feels when you get a really thoughtful gift where people actually think about it, serve it up to you, and you know that they thought about you, they know things about you, and they tried to match this thing with who you are and what you want. It makes you feel really good. You also have gotten the gift where somebody either ran into their gift closet and recycled something very quickly or didn't think about it at all. And it doesn't always feel as good. And like, I'm not a perfect gift giver, so it's just an analogy, but we are giving something to our customers as marketers to try to entice them to spend more time with us. And so we need to meet them where they need us to go rather than sometimes where we or what our companies would want to tell them, right?
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I say it like that. Sometimes I talk about it like bad date marketing, right? Like, you go on a date and somebody only talks about themselves, and then they ask you on a second date and you're like, do.
No,
It's
thanks.
the same kind of thing if you really think about it. And I think really putting yourself as a human being into the work you do. And I think, right, when you're doing marketing, it's one to many, and you're often thinking about, the market. But as you develop content or you develop programs or you develop products, you're developing them for a human being. And
Yes.
treat your customers the way you would like to be treated. You know how great it feels when you go into a restaurant and you have like a really great service experience, and like
Yeah.
that's what our job is. Our job is
Yes.
to understand what our customers want and serve it up. And sometimes it is, right, this balance between what our company wants us to do or wants us to tell them. And I think marketing's job is to work with really talented people like you to help develop a story that can tie both things in, but serves that
Yes.
customer desire, that puts something into a box with the bow that delights your customer at the end of the day. Like, that is what our job
Yes.
is.
Yes, absolutely. Love all of those analogies. So many great points there. Let's shift a little bit, talk about scalability and measurability. So once you get all of these core basics in place, how do you start building a system then, using that term somewhat loosely here, that's scalable and measurable?
So I think developing the objective helps with at least the start of measurable, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so that if you don't have an objective, you don't have measurement. And I know people will say, well, I have Google Analytics, and that's fine. But what are you trying to what are you trying to change, right? What are you trying to improve? And so I think the fundamental question is, where do you think you can improve? Or the other way to look at it is, where do we think we kind of suck? And maybe that's your personal experience just with benchmarking in terms of click-through rates you've had at other companies, or time on site, or number of page views. So pick your poison. Think about where you think you have opportunity and start knocking away at that, right? And then yell from the rooftops that you are making improvements here, and to start showing those improvements
Love
and
that.
what those improvements could potentially do later on, right? And as you knock through one, you can start adding another, right? So maybe it
Yes.
is, we want people to stay on our site longer because they're only staying on our site for a very short amount of time. We want them to get on the site longer. Okay, now we want them to stay on the site, and we want them, instead of to only be on one page, we want them to be engaged. So we want to make sure that they're scrolling on that page, or they're going to a second page. So what can we do? Okay, we might have to look at our web design and our layout. Like, is it easy to navigate? Does it have things that we can adjust? And then to make it scalable, you actually need to understand cause and effect, right? So
Yes.
start thinking about, okay, so we have a lot of people come to our website, and we have a lot of people on our pages, but we don't have a lot of people clicking, our calls to
Hmm.
action. Okay, so what can you do? Well, you can try different calls to action. You can try different placements of calls to action. So if you change the placement and the words at the same time, you don't know which one worked. And it
Right.
could be both, right? So you need to make sure that you manage variables. And this is something I harp a lot with my teams because it's always fun, right? And if you can like build a team that looks forward to continuous improvement, like what could we do different next time? How could we do this better? It's great. And you can build off of it and it can get really exciting. But you can also get yourself into a situation where like, whoo, let's re-engineer it this way. And
Changing all the things.
you
Yep.
change it all and then you can't, you don't know what worked or what didn't work. And so you don't need, right? You don't need like this gargantuan sample sizes. Run a quick A/B test. The beauty of digital is it's fast and easy to change. So, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Run an A/B test. Run it for 2 weeks, depending on what your web traffic is or what your how frequently you're posting on LinkedIn and how many people are following. Like, do an A/B test. Do it for a week. Do it for 10 days. Is your click-through rate or your success so much higher here? Great. Okay, that seemed better than the last one. So let's keep that variable. We know where it used to be. Keep that variable. Now change the next thing. So you can do it in relatively rapid succession. It's not like it has to be some,
Right. Long drawn out.
right?
Right.
2,500 people do it, right? Like it's quick. And that's the beauty, I think, of the digital age. Try it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, go back. Okay, then what's your other option? Change the color? Okay, change the color. Does it matter if the call to action is red or green? Okay, change the color, see what happens. So,
Yeah.
but constantly kind of asking those questions. Could we make it better if we try this? Could we make it better if we try that? So, and if it's better, great. Okay, let's try the next thing. What else can we do to try to improve? But really, and really kind of shout from the rooftop where you're having success.
Yeah.
Because
I love that.
right,
I love that shouting from the rooftop. I mean,
yeah.
you're layering on top of one success metric after another, right? These changes you're making, you're layering them on top of one another and showing the organization the change that's being made, because ultimately, what are we looking to do? We're looking to make the case to increase the marketing budget and the investment, because chances are, if it wasn't a strategic marketing function to begin with, the resources weren't fully where they needed to be in order to really support growth of the organization and take it to the next level, which again, I think we talked about in part one, right? Reverse engineering the understanding of here's what we need in place in order to hit the right target. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about budgeting and resourcing, because it can make or break a marketing strategy. And what's your approach in terms of building this case and making the right partnerships with the finance department as well?
So I'm glad you brought that up. I always tell my team finance is our friend. And I have always worked very hard to have a very open and very transparent relationship with finance. And one of the things where if you're shouting from the rooftops and you're able to show the organization where you're making changes, right? And where you're starting to make an impact, it's number one, easier for everybody to kind of solidify around that, right? So if you have all of these different people who have different ideas of what marketing it should be doing or could be doing, you suddenly are showing them this moving object that's helping them, right? So that's one of the things, but it also helps when you start showing that to finance to say, okay, this is why I'm going to do this. We're going to do this because of this. And talk about your objectives. And as somebody coming in to say, here's where I see problems, to talk to finance a little bit about, here's where I think the organization was wasting money because we were putting all of this money into these things and they were never measured. We're 100% conjecture based in terms of was this successful or not. So, I can make this at least measured, and then we can make better financial decisions. And then once you start showing success, that like you can get people eyeballs to clicks, to fill out a form,
to convert.
and they convert, and this is the revenue that's been generated. It makes it a lot easier once you can start showing that. Then you typically have some pretty strong true believers in the finance organization, and I have found that finance can often help stick up for marketing, and really support and be a really strategic partner for marketing as time goes on. But they need to understand what you're fundamentally trying to do and how you're doing it. To me, that is a no-brainer. Like,
yeah, I mean,
it's a must. Yeah.
that's a big one right there, folks. You can get finance to stick up for marketing. It can be done. You heard it here first. Make them your champion, make them your friends. Let's talk a little bit about, I like to ask this question a lot of folks that come on the show, is how do you decide what to outsource and what to keep in-house?
That's a good question. It depends on the organization, but I would say, like, if you are an organization that has process challenges and discipline challenges, right? You are very used to decision by committee, or deciding that this is the tactic you're going to do and there's no objective for it, and that's kind of how things are run. I have found that outsourcing is one of the greatest ways to force an organization to actually think through everything. First of all, if you're outsourcing, obviously your outsourced partners are experts at, right? Very few marketers are experts at
all the
creative and public relations and copywriting and strategy and right. So using people who are really, really smart, and really, really smart is typically really, really efficient. That's important. But what's even more important is it makes your team focus on what they're trying to accomplish with that partner. Because if you are undisciplined working with a partner, the bill is going to show it.
Yes, it is. You are right about that.
Real quick. And then you're going to be explaining to finance why nothing happened with this spend. And so I typically have shied away from kind of internal creative departments and those kinds of things, unless you're in an organization that is really, really well processed and really has a lot of things going, and maybe you're working on the finesse or potentially bringing new infrastructure in to improve a marketing department. But I typically shy away from that, because what happens is, if there is no objective set and it's like, ooh, let's do a brochure on XYZ, or let's create a post on XYZ, and somebody can help make it cooler and prettier, and the next thing you know, you're potentially multiple steps away, or more people are potentially influencing you. If you're in an organization that's kind of a lot of committee, in terms of approvals, like suddenly you have the ability to be like, oh, we didn't want to say it that way, let's do this. And the next thing you know, you are no longer true north. You are now the whim of everyone around you. And so for me, outsource partners help bring discipline. They're smarter than I am, right? They're smarter and more efficient than I am in the craft that they're in. And that's where it makes a lot of sense for me. And you need to think about those disciplines in terms of what you're trying to do. What are your goals? And look at.
I think that's really great advice. I totally agree with all of that. Let's talk about, the leadership part of this, right? Leading with courage through all of this change. It's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy work. Probably not for the faint of heart. So this is a two-parter. First part is, where do you find the courage to keep pushing? for change when things get hard, when there's resistance. And then the second part of it, though, is how do you keep your team motivated through all of these changes? So first part self, second part team.
First part self. It might be a little nutty, but I do play games in my head sometimes where this is how I'm going to win on this one. And I have little steps that if I do this, so part of it is just my weird inner mechanism that is very competitive and has turned most of my life into some sort of competition. And so that motivates me by myself.
Celebrating the small steps, really, right? Like taking
Celebrating the
those
small steps and sometimes just knowing, right? Sometimes all it takes in an organization is like, can you fight the headwinds. You just need that first domino. If that first domino falls, like everything is going, so sometimes it's like, do I know what my first domino is going to be? Is it insight? And like, do I have somebody else, my boss, does he understand what this first, or she, do they understand what this first domino is? Or does my finance business partner understand what this first domino is? So when I get frustrated or I'm like, do you have somebody who understands how close you're getting and the progress that you're trying to make? So I think it's that. And then again, it's a little bit of nutty inside stuff, but everybody has their quirks.
We do.
For my team, I think there's a balance, right? We have to show them. And so I think shouting from the rooftop is one of the best things you can do for your team. I think being in the trenches with them. I am not a leader of people that sits in my high castle and shares edicts. Like, get in there. If I have a failure with the way I've approached something or tried to sell something up, like, it's okay for me to share that with my team. I actually think that camaraderie and being willing to say, look, I make mistakes too. This is how we all learn. I'm going to go back in and I'm going to try it this way. Or, do any of you want to weigh in on a different tact we might be able to take? Because we've now hit, right, a roadblock that we didn't anticipate hitting. I think being as transparent as possible. Obviously, there are things as leaders we know that it's inappropriate to share, but I am a believer that if it is shareable information, the more transparent I can be with my team, the more real I can be with my team, the stronger the team is, the tighter knit the group is, the more collaborative the team is. And I think it starts with us, right? I think it starts with us. And I think we need to think about also reiterating to our team and then also to our leadership where what we're trying to do actually works with the vision of the company. This is what the company's vision is. This is what I'm trying to do from a marketing perspective to help make that a reality. And, thinking about some of those things that are values within the organization, that the organization has stated in their mission statement or in their HR documents, that these are the values that we hold dear. Where can you tie the work that you're doing to those things? And sometimes demonstrate those, especially when you're hitting roadblocks or especially when you aren't sure you're being heard or you're frustrated. I think sometimes going back to some of those things to say, like, I understand that you may not understand what we're trying to accomplish or you disagree with where I'm coming from, but like, this is a value that this company has, and this is what I'm trying to do to achieve that for my team. And I think sometimes tying stuff to a value, especially when you're talking to upper leadership, is really impactful when you feel like maybe you're charging down the street alone and wondering, like, is anybody there? Like,
turning around and wondering if anyone's following you.
Yeah. And so,
that's all such great advice. Shouting from the rooftop to celebrate the successes, transparency, so critical, being willing to admit mistakes. and tying things back to core values, keeping people focused on that true north for the organization and how marketing helps contribute to that. So much great advice and so much great inspiration for those of you out there who are looking to start building or refining a strategic marketing organization that supports growth. And Yvonne, how can listeners get in touch with you if they'd like to dig deeper on any of this?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn, Yvonne KF Leonard. I'd be happy to chat or give my advice if I can give you any insight. I'd be happy.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for doing this with me, Yvonne.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. It was my pleasure.
And for all of you out there, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the conversation, do us a favor and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for being part of the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence, because the future of healthcare depends on it. We'll see you next time.